People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, it's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Tune in tonight at 8 p.m. for State of the Nation. Tonight, joining me is the former chief Brexit negotiator, the Lord Frost, who will give us a taste of what it was like in the EU's negotiation room. Plus, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, will be here to provide one of his infamous rants. All that coming up and much more at 8 p.m. on State of the Nation.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight with Patrick Christys. Following the explosive leak of Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages during lockdown, did the disgraced former health secretary lie to the public about placing a protective ring around care homes? And after these bombshell revelations, should Hancock face a criminal investigation for his pandemic failings? Join Patrick 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Well, a very major leak of Matthew Hancock's WhatsApp messages, casting great doubt over some of his judgments. I don't like the way it's all been leaked, but is it time for the truth? Why have we not yet had an inquiry, a government inquiry released, as many other European countries have? We'll do Rish's reveal. We'll go through what was said at Windsor and what the European Union is saying, and we'll work out what is actually true. We'll go to the Isle of Man, where some very brave parents are standing up against real poison that was taught to 11-year-olds, and Danielle, Lloyd, will join me on Talking Pints. But before all of that, let's get the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nigel, thank you. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Some breaking news to bring you. The remains have been found in the search for the 2-month-old baby of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon. Detective Superintendent Lewis Basford gave an update from the Metropolitan Police just now. Well, earlier on, the police applied for a 36-hour extension to detain Constance and Mark Gordon. They said they feared the child had come to serious harm, and we've now found out that breaking news that the remains have been found. Well, the newborn's parents, who spent 53 days on the run, have been further arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. We'll bring you more as we get it. The parents of a morbidly obese 16-year-old girl have been jailed for gross negligence manslaughter in the first televised court hearing in Wales. Kayla Titford was found dead at her home in Newton in 2020 after suffering from an infection caused by extreme obesity. At the time of her death, she weighed nearly 23 stone and she had a BMI of 70. Her mother admitted the charge and was jailed for 6 years. Her father, who pled not guilty, was sentenced to 7 years and 6 months. The Prime Minister says we must wait for the results of the official inquiry before judging the government's handling of the COVID pandemic. It comes after the Telegraph claimed former Health Secretary Matt Hancock rejected advice from the Chief Medical Officer to test all residents before allowing them to enter a care home. A spokesperson for Mr Hancock says thousands of his WhatsApp messages have been stolen and doctored to create a false story. The Greek Transport Minister has resigned after 2 trains collided, killing at least 36 people and injuring more than 85. The intercity train was carrying over 300 passengers when it hit a freight train near the city of Larissa. A station master in charge of signalling has been arrested and charged with causing mass deaths through negligence. Firefighters say the death toll is expected to rise. Labour is calling for victims of the Turkey earthquakes to be granted temporary UK visas. Opposition MPs want the visa scheme to be available for families that have had to flee after quakes struck their country and Syria in early February, leaving at least 50,000 dead. And for our television viewers, hold your breaths, for this near miss on what seems a quiet residential road in West Sussex turns into something a little more dramatic. 2 people on a moped narrowly avoid being hit by a train travelling 70 miles per hour. They were riding through red flashing lights whilst the barriers were down. Police described it as stupidly reckless behaviour. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Farage.
Good evening. So, Matt Hancock went to a journalist called Isabel Oakeshott to write his pandemic memoirs. He gave her 100,000 WhatsApp messages, 2.3 million words. And they covered everything from what happened in the pandemic to constituency business to personal matters, some of which, of course, could evoke a rather wide interest. Little did he know that Isabel Oakeshott would give those diaries, if you want to call them that, give those messages, or sell those messages, I'm not sure which, to the Daily Telegraph. Now, I may not like the way that this has been done. I don't like the way this has been done, but there is one very good thing. We are beginning to learn things about very fundamental decisions that were taken by government on our behalf with virtually no consultation during that extraordinary period. And tomorrow's big Telegraph lead will all be about why kids in schools were quite unnecessarily and wrongly, I think, made to wear face masks. So expect this to rumble on, much as the expenses scandal did 10 years ago. But here's the point. None of this should need to happen, because we are owed a full, open government inquiry into what went right and what went wrong. Other European countries have managed to deliver their reports already. For some reason, we haven't got there yet. I'm going to try and find out why in just a moment. So is it time for the truth? Because I think it is. Let me know your view. Farage at gbnews.uk. Now, the allegations are that Matt Hancock, quite willfully, did not allow people coming from the community into care homes to be tested to see whether they had COVID. And remember, up to about 20,000 people died in those care homes in the early month of the pandemic. It is said he was far keener on reaching the target of 100,000 people a day to be tested. We're going way back here to April 2020. He did meet the target by putting about 40,000 tests in the post. I have to say, at the time, my disregard for him as a human being, given that level of cynicism, knew virtually no bounds. But, to be fair, Matt Hancock's team have today said this, and it's important that we do hear something from him. They say these stolen messages have been doctored to create a false story that Matt rejected clinical advice on care home testing. This is wrong. On April the 14th, Matt received a response to his request for advice from the Chief Medical Officer saying that testing, and he goes on to say he was advised it was not currently possible to test everyone entering the care homes. That is a defence that has been given by Hancock's team this evening, and in the interest of balance, I thought it right that I read that out. Either way, something went horrendously wrong, and we're not getting anything from our official inquiry. Well, one man who persistently, annoyingly, I think for the government, asked questions all the way through the coronavirus pandemic is Sir Christopher Chope, Conservative Member of Parliament for Christchurch. How do you respond, Sir Christopher, to the initial headlines that people were being put into care homes from the community without any testing at all?
Well, those are the facts. And I asked Matt Hancock in May of 2020 about the situation of care home managers who had refused to take in patients from hospital until they'd been tested. And I asked him if he would congratulate them, because by so doing, they saved the lives of many of their residents. And I'm afraid he couldn't bring himself to say that he did congratulate them. He said it's all a very difficult question.
Yeah.
So even then, he was hedging his bets and almost thinking it more important to discharge people from hospitals without thinking about the welfare of the people in the care homes.
The power that government took upon itself during the pandemic was totally extraordinary, wasn't it?
It was, without precedent and totally unnecessary as well, because we have something called the Civil Contingencies Act. The government could have done everything it wanted to under that act. The only difference would have been that it would have been subject to proper parliamentary scrutiny, and they would have had to have been an assessment, an impact assessment of the actions that they were taking, and those actions would have had to have been proportionate, particularly and reasonable, particularly taking into account issues around personal liberty. And if those discussions had taken place in the House of Commons against those criteria, then I don't think we would be in the mess that we're in now, because the House of Commons would have been able to scrutinise the government's activities.
So why did our elected members of Parliament vote for the Coronavirus Act, get rid of their own powers of scrutiny, and allow government to do what the hell it liked? Why?
Well, because they were sleepwalking into this. They were, I think, pressured. But I think, sadly, that there are too few people in the House of Commons who realise that the role of the House of Commons is to scrutinise everything, even in an emergency. And we had the powers there to scrutinise, and we didn't use them. And then I went along with having a lockdown for the first few weeks because I bought into the idea that the hospitals weren't in a state to deal with it. But thereafter, I was against any further lockdowns. I was against the mask wearing and all the rest of it. And I think a lot more of my colleagues would have been in a similar frame of mind if they'd been presented with the facts. But, of course, we weren't allowed to have them.
No, and we're still not getting the facts. Other European countries have done their reports, they've reached their conclusions, they're attempting to learn lessons for the future. The Swedes are particularly smug, having not gone for lockdown and achieved a better result and less harm. When are we going to get an official inquiry? When are we going to find out what really happened? Or do we have to get it all through leaks?
Well, I think if we want to get anything soon, we're going to have to bypass the inquiry, because the inquiry is on such a long scale that when are we going to get any results? Although it's been put into separate modules and there's a possibility that there may be interim reports on some of those modules, I think we should press for that. And that may give some earlier results on some of the key issues.
Well, will you promise our viewers and listeners that you will go back into that chamber and jolly well kick and punch and do whatever you can do to get some of this released?
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for.
Good. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Nigel.
For joining us. Well, it was, of course, the care homes that felt the full impact of all of this. And I'm joined by Simon Walls, who's clinical lead at St Cecilia's nursing home in Scarborough. Simon, good evening. Are you shocked by the revelations that the Daily Telegraph have put out today, or is this pretty much what you would have expected?
To be honest, Nigel, it's what we've suspected from the start. I mean, you can go back to prior to April. That I know this has been said from April. Prior to that, from March, where I couldn't get a test for a resident I suspected of having COVID for love nor money from anywhere.
Yeah. And did you? I mean, what happened in your care home? Did you suffer with people coming into your particular care home who were COVID positive?
We did, Nigel. We had a resident that came out of hospital that wasn't tested prior to any testing. The exact person I was talking about trying to get hold of a test. In the following 10 days, we had 7 deaths, of which I suspect probably 6 out of the 7 could be attributed to COVID.
And yet, Simon, isn't it astonishing that, we're learning as a wider public things that you have known and experienced firsthand. We're learning about this from leaks, not from a proper, full, official government inquiry. This is outrageous, isn't it?
Oh, I think it's an absolute disgrace. I think that it's a slap in the face to all the residents, to their families, to people who've lost people, not only in care homes, but in hospitals and the like. And it's just, we knew this pandemic was coming, Nigel. We knew we could see it sweeping across nations, across continents, regardless of age or anything. There was nothing in there that would say it would affect people more than most. We knew the people that we were looking after were the people that are most at risk, and nothing was done. And there was very little help, very little advice, very little guidance. Too little, too late.
Well, in that regard, as I say, I don't approve of the manner of these leaks, but in that regard, perhaps if we're learning things that we might have to wait a very long time for in the inquiry, perhaps that is, on balance, a good thing. What's done is done. We can't bring people back in your care home or elsewhere. But there is, I think, one very important thing, that we learn lessons for any future kind of major flu outbreak or pandemic. Do you think we're in a position yet, in your sector, your key sector, to have learned anything?
I think as a sector, Nigel, we have learned a lot. We learned how to manage COVID far quicker than the government were giving the guidelines out as to what we should and shouldn't do. We learned the hard way, and sadly, that's not really the way to go about it. I know that there was a disbandment of a government group that were there to tackle pandemics and serious illnesses and viruses, because it was expected to come at some point in December, prior to the actual to COVID commencing and coming over to this country. I think it's something that all we ever ask from our staff is that they're truthful, they're honest, and if they've made a mistake, that they hold their hands up. And this is something, sadly, we aren't seeing from the government. We aren't, and I don't expect them to really see the whole and true truth.
Well, I have to say, Simon Walls, I'd rather share that, and I think perhaps the biggest anger of all is that we know big mistakes were made, and yet nobody is being held to account, which is awful. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story, your sad story of what happened in your care home.
Thank you.
All highly unsatisfactory. In a moment, we'll do a Rishi reveal, what he said at Windsor, and then we're going to tell you what the European Union have said in their document. And we're going to find that a 50-year tradition has been maintained. Ever since Harold Wilson came back from Brussels with a deal, we find that what British Prime Ministers say and what really happens can be rather different.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on
Absolutely.
Jubes and Kerr.
Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So your reactions, is it time we were told the truth? Richard says on PPE contracts, Lord Bethell was forced to delete his WhatsApp due to a lack of space on his phone. Either Matt Hancock had a much bigger phone than Lord Bethell, or Lord Bethell had more than 100,000 messages on his phone. Richard, there are lots of accusations flying around about PPE, undoubtedly some of them true, but we will ask Lord Bethell directly for his explanation, because we do try to be fair. Kamlesh says Matt Hancock needs to be brought to justice. Many people died through his incompetence. Kamlesh, I do feel people do need to be held to account, but this should not be happening through leaks. We should already have an official public inquiry into what actually happened. What are they afraid of? What is it they're trying to cover up? Because that's the feeling that I get. I get here from Dame, 10,000 messages leaked. This all feels very convenient. Nick says, this government has proven it's inept. No wonder our EU trade deal is such a mess, Nigel. We've gone from having an academic like Thatcher to having a PM like Boris, who was to have percentages and probabilities explained to him by disgraced Dominic Cummings. And finally, Simon says, assuming that it takes 30 seconds to write and send a message. That's 50,000 minutes, 833 hours, or 34 days continually on WhatsApp. Does anyone else find that a little bit odd? Well, look, I don't actually find it odd, Simon, because, I mean, that is now how people communicate, and they're part of WhatsApp groups. And, of course, some of these WhatsApp groups were the Chief Medical Officer, the Chief Scientific Advisor, the Health Secretary, the Prime Minister. I'm not especially surprised by any of this. Now, it is time now to go through Rishi Sunak's deal. And this is really, really important because, once again, today, our newspapers are giving the most positive spin you have ever heard. It's as if he's performed some miracle and the Conservatives could well storm back to victory. Well, let's just have a look at some of the issues that Rishi highlighted in his speeches in Windsor and in the House of Commons. Have a listen to this.
Goods destined for Northern Ireland will travel through a new green lane, with a separate red lane for goods at risk of moving onto the EU. In the green lane, burdensome customs bureaucracy will be scrapped. It means food retailers like supermarkets, restaurants and wholesalers will no longer need hundreds of certificates for every lorry.
So it sounds fantastic, doesn't it? There's a green lane. You can send your sausages. Isn't it marvellous? Well, let's have a look at what's there in the text of the EU document, because they really paint a slightly different slant on this. Identity checks will be reduced to only 5%. Physical checks will follow a risk-based and intelligence-led approach. Let's be clear about the green lane, all right? There will be checks on 5% of goods. Every shipment that goes will need paperwork. Oh, and by the way, if you're making sausages in England for sale in Northern Ireland, you'll have to put a label on them as well. So on the green lane, I don't think truth matches what Rishi said. What about excise duties and cheap booze? This is what the Prime Minister had to say.
We've amended the legal text of the protocol to ensure we can make critical VAT and excise changes for the whole of the UK. For example, on alcohol duty, meaning our reforms to cut the cost of a pint in the pub will now apply in Northern Ireland.
Well, that sounds absolutely marvellous. Not just sausages, but cheap beer too. But what do the European Union have to say about these excise duties? Well, they say there is now also a possibility to tax all alcoholic beverages according to their strength and to set reduced duty rates as long as the minimum rates are not below EU minimum duty rates. So still, the European Union will have a say over what the price of a pint is. But what about the big one? What about VAT? This is what Sunak had to say.
We've amended the legal text of the treaty so that critical VAT and excise changes will apply to the whole of the United Kingdom.
So we've taken back control of VAT. Well, that's absolutely marvellous until you have a look at this document produced by our friends in Brussels, because they say something rather different. They say these arrangements include a possibility to set UK VAT rates below EU VAT minimum rates for immovable goods with no risk that those goods could enter the EU single market, e.g. a heat pump for a house. We can reduce VAT on heat pumps on your house, but on a vast swathe of other areas, Brussels are still in charge. And the big one, the really, really big one, is, of course, the Stormont break and the veto. Here's Rishi Sunak.
The Stormont break does more than just give Northern Ireland a say over new EU laws. It means they can block them. How will this work? The democratically elected Assembly can oppose new EU goods rules that would have significant and lasting effects on their everyday lives.
So we can block, the Assembly in Stormont can block EU rules. But oh, no, that's not what the document says. The document says the Stormont break will allow the UK government, at the request of 30 members of the Legislative Assembly in Northern Ireland, to stop the application in Northern Ireland of amended or replacing provisions of protocol-related EU law that may have a significant and lasting impact specific to the everyday lives of the communities there. So in extremis, Stormont could raise a flag, but it would have to be the government that put through a veto on that legislation. But there is a slight problem here, which is if we do that, the European Union then has the right to sue us for damages. And so I can't see it ever being used. Oh, and a final reminder. Remember, one of the big things in the whole Brexit debate and since was the role in Luxembourg of the European Court of Justice. To be free, surely we can no longer be under the control of a European Union court. And yet this is what Commission President Ms von der Leyen had to say.
So the ECJ will have the final say on EU law and single market issues.
There you go. That's the bonus ball, isn't it? Yes, Rishi's realities, I'm afraid, are coming home to roost. Well, earlier on, about an hour ago, I sat here with DUP Member of Parliament Sammy Wilson, and he is the Brexit spokesman for the DUP. Sammy Wilson, you know, you look at today's newspapers, there's leaders, there's articles, comment pieces, what an incredible deal Rishi Sunak has done. Andrew Neil in the Daily Mail today says that those that criticise are nitpickers. Are you a nitpicker?
No, I'm not a nitpicker. Indeed, I think what you should be looking at are the useful idiots who, before the deal was even printed, before they had a copy in their hands, were telling everybody, this is a great deal, this is a brilliant deal. I'll tell you one thing, if we had come out and rejected the deal as quickly as some of those people who are now supporting it has come out, we'd have been blamed for not looking at the facts, not trying to get behind what the details were, etc. Yet we've got all these people out selling it, and selling it on the basis of the government's spin, not the substance. And indeed, as you have pointed out, once you look at the substance, you find that many of the claims which are made are just totally untrue.
But we can at least now enjoy the same sausages on cocktail sticks at events in London and Belfast. That's something, isn't it?
Well, provided that they have a separate label on them.
Ah.
And
so the sausages that go from the factory in the UK out to Northern Ireland have to have a label on.
Any goods which come into Northern Ireland go through the Green Lane, and by the way, they will still, as you've pointed out, have substantial tax on them, must be labelled for Northern Ireland only. And here's the irony. See, if they've been sent through the Irish Republic, they could have gone into the Irish Republic and come into Northern Ireland without a label on them. This is a nonsense of this. And, you know, it's only when you delve into the detail you see that the spin on this is ridiculous. And I hope that people don't buy it in the way in which the government is hoping to put it. I've spoken to many people in the House of Commons today, and many of them are just relieved. And I think this is what it's all about now. They're relieved that a government which is under pressure has now got something positive to sell, and nobody's being critical of it. And if you're critical of it, you know, even though it's honest criticism. And Nigel, can I just say this to you? I mean, we need to know what this is all about, because the future of Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom will depend upon this deal being right. If it's not right, there'll be further divergence. And indeed...
Well, you say that, but what's really interesting is in the UK document, it talks about the risks of divergence within the United Kingdom. And that hints to me that actually, as Northern Ireland has to comply with EU law, actually the rest of the United Kingdom increasingly could too. Well, it doesn't feel like Brexit, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I mean, already we know that the United Kingdom will be tied when it comes to VAT rates, because they'll have to mimic the lowest rates in the EU. We know that the UK will still have to comply with EU law in Northern Ireland, and UK producers will have to comply with EU law in Northern Ireland. And of course, once that foot's in the door, you can be absolutely sure that if not this government, future governments will then use that as the excuse for aligning themselves.
Well, and we've already seen the SNP in the House of Commons today arguing, well, if Rishi Sunak says it's a fantastic settlement for Northern Ireland, why can't Scotland have the same?
Well, and I think that, you know, in his enthusiasm to oversell the deal, he has shot himself in the foot. And equally, what was said by the SNP in the House of Commons today could be said by producers and businessmen in England and Wales. If Northern Ireland is now the most, so use his own words, the most special place in the whole of the world, because it's access to the UK market and access to the EU market. If I was a a producer here and a businessman in England, I'd say, well, make us the same give us the same special status. And, you know, so in his enthusiasm, he's almost made the EU case for bringing the UK as a whole back into the single market.
Yeah, I get it. The DUP can't accept this, can they?
Well, the first thing we have said, and we're not going to be accused in the same way as I'm accusing some of the MPs and other commentators who have come out and just said, we'll accept this and it's a good deal. We will examine it, but all I can say to you, Nigel, is the more we have examined the detail, the more we have become aware of the flaws, and that puts us in a stronger position than when we make our final judgment, to say this judgment is made on not listening to the spin. This judgment is made on looking at what is good for the United Kingdom, for the Union, for the integrity of the United Kingdom market, and for Northern Ireland as a whole. And that's what we'll be doing over the next number of weeks. But, you know, I think as already made clear to you already, we have identified the flaws, and with those flaws are fundamental, and if they're not changed, then how can we possibly accept it?
Sammy Wilson, thank you. Well, that was Sammy Wilson being diplomatic. It's a very rare thing. But I think I know what's going to happen. As he so rightly says, the more you dig into this, the more you think about it, the more you look at detail, you see that actually, ultimately, substance has to win over spin. In a minute, we'll have a look at the case on the Isle of Man of a transgender teacher telling 11-year-olds there are 73 different genders.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
is the What the Farage moment. Last Saturday, I was totally astonished that there was a demo and a counter-demo that took place in Lewisham in South London. Hundreds of people in the street in Lewisham demanding that drag queens should continue to have the right to go into our schools to teach youngsters about their view of life. Now, look, we're tolerant about all sorts of human beings, but there is a question as to what is appropriate to be taught to 11 and 12-year-olds. Well, on the Isle of Man, this issue has come to a head in quite a big way over the course of the last few days at the Queen Elizabeth II High School in Peel. And a drag queen appeared there and spoke to 11 and 12-year-olds. And it now seems that parents are standing up and saying they are not prepared to put up with this. Let's find out more by going now straight to the Isle of Man. And I'm going to be joined by Matthew Cheetham, who is a parent at the QE2 school, and I'm going to be joined by Eliza Cox, Vice Chair of the Maroon, if I pronounce that correctly, Commissioners, a form of local government on the island. Good evening to both of you. Thank you for coming on the programme. We really want a proper explanation of this, and I'm keen to start, Matthew, with you. You had a child that was put in front of this drag queen. What happened that's offended you?
I think it's the fact that they've gone in without the parents being asked, is it okay? This is what we're teaching. This is on or off the curriculum. We're still unsure. And then for a child to basically say, look, there's two genders. That's what my mum and dad have told me. And then basically to be removed from the class by the teacher as being seen to be as offensive towards the drag queen, which I think everybody agrees it's not right at all. They're quick to say we offend them, but then when they clearly have offended the adults and the children, it seems they get punished for this. Where we're trying to bring up a level of trust with the children, it's not there.
I mean, that's astonishing. For a child of that age to be thrown out of a class for saying, Mum and Dad have taught me there are two genders. And I understand the drag queen taught these children that there are 73 different genders, which I think at 11 years old must be somewhat confusing. And even, I understand, Matthew, some fairly graphic accounts of skin grafts.
Yeah, so essentially they was the year 7, so 10, 11, 12-year-olds, they're being separated into 3 groups. One was to go to the drag queen. The other was to go with, it was a girl at the time. She's gone into the classroom with 5 boys. She didn't really know them, quite a strange group to put together. And they were basically given a sexual toy, so to speak, and shown how to put a condom on. And then the other team or the other group were then shown on one of the teacher's phones how to take a skin graft from an arm for a girl and then to create a penis with it.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. That's all a bit much, isn't it? Yes, I have to say, I can understand, Matthew, why you are upset. I really can. Eliza Cox, it seems that Matthew is far from alone and that a lot of parents have objected to what's happening and there is a current suspension of these activities within the school. Is this something, I mean, you're involved there with local government, is this something that you think the government of the island are going to do something about?
Yes, I do. We have a couple of really fantastic MHKs, is what we call them over here, Minister of House of Keys. And as soon as they heard that this was happening, they stopped it straight away. They wanted to investigate it fully so they know exactly what's going on and what is happening. And they are doing everything in their power to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And kind of like we welcome the report that they're doing at the moment, and we really look forward to seeing it.
Well, it just goes to show, doesn't it, that when parents actually do, and they're not frightened, and they take a principled stand, and they get together, they can be effective. But Eliza, let me just ask you, how on earth did this, and I think it is poison, frankly, to expose 10, 11, 12-year-olds to this. How did this ever happen in the first place on a place like the Isle of Man?
I don't know, Nigel. This is what the independent review will find out for us, how this actually happened. There was obviously miscommunication along the line, and the independent review will obviously open that up and let us know what happened.
Well, I want to say thank you, Eliza. Thank you, Matthew, for coming on and sharing that story and for having the courage to stand up for what you believe is right. And I'm sure this is going on in many schools over here, but often parents are too scared to say anything. So well done you, and thank you for sharing that story. Well, I must say, with all that talk of skin grafts and what they can be used for, I think it's probably time for a drink. Yes, thank goodness the next segment is Talking Pints.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Need that drink first today after that last story. Goodness gracious me, and I'm joined by Danielle Lloyd, star model, TV personality. Welcome to the programme. Now, was it as a little girl, were you always going to be a beautician, a model? Was this, where your life was always going to go?
I actually was in a really violent relationship when I was young, so I had no confidence whatsoever, and it was actually my mum who got me involved in doing pageants and modelling, just to try and get me some confidence back. And obviously had a lot of knockbacks doing the pageants, but I carried on going, and then eventually I won Miss England.
Well, you won Miss England, you won Miss Great Britain. I mean, wow, and yet today people talk about pageants as if it's exploitative of women and it's all demeaning and it's wrong. What would you say to that?
I'd say, obviously I get where they come from when, people dress, they get the girls in like the bikini segments or whatever. They've changed that now and they are a lot more covered up. But for me, it helped me so much. It gave me so much confidence. I actually got on stage and I talked about domestic violence, and that's actually what made me win, because it gave me the strength to help other people.
Well, it gave you so much confidence that you went to Playboy and you modelled for Playboy, and you were stripped of your title for inappropriate behaviour.
I know. Well, thankfully in the end they actually gave me it back, and I do still have the crown. But no, yeah, and do you know what? I loved it. It was amazing. It was the best experience ever, Playboy. Like, I was so lucky, and actually the pictures are something that I look back on today and think, wow. Not many people can say that.
No, that's good. You know, if that's how you feel about it, that's good.
Yeah.
And of course, it was the Lads Mag's boom time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Loaded, Nuts, Zoo, and all these different Lads Mags. It was a huge phenomenon.
Yeah, it was.
And you were there on front cover after front cover. But again, we sort of think, well, men shouldn't behave like this anymore.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Like, I suppose if my kids were watching that, I've got 4 boys, so I'll be like, put that down.
Would you?
I don't know. Obviously, lads are lads, aren't they? And I think, like, I'm really fortunate because it was an amazing time back then. But I was almost like in front of the camera, I was somebody else to what I was behind. Like, it was almost like a...
You see, some people, Danielle, would say, well, on the one hand, you did all these things, but on the other, you know, you do understand what domestic violence is. You campaigned on this issue. There are some that say, well, it's all these lads mags, it's this toxic culture that leads to all this violence and problems. But you see them as two different things.
Yeah, 2 different things. Obviously, for myself, I was in control by this point of what I wanted to do. I took control of my own life, and I made a lot of money doing it. So, you know, it was fun, and I look back and I don't have any regrets.
Good, you made lots of money. And so suddenly, you know, you become this TV person and you're appearing on all sorts of different programmes. Some good, maybe some not so good. Yeah. But you do have a bit of success, don't you? Because, you know, you go on to the celebrity version of programmes and you start winning them. You know, Total Wipeout. You go on, you win. You know, you go on to the celeb weakest link.
I know.
And you've got to answer, and you've got to answer loads of questions, and you win.
I know, it's crazy. I don't know how.
What you did?
I must have manifested it.
What was it? I mean, did you enjoy being? You were a TV celebrity. You were one of the early wags, which means you're constantly, whatever you do, there's someone there snapping away at what you do, and every single piece of clothing that you wear, and how your hair looks, and how maybe you look a bit tired that day, or don't look, or the makeup's different. What's it like living under that kind of spotlight?
It can take its toll. Like, I've had really down days. I've actually been really down. I had a lot of problems and ended up in rehab. I was really depressed. I actually did consider taking my own life at one point, and it all was down to feeling the stress of being in the spotlight. It was just all too much.
And almost a competition. You're competing against everybody else, the other wags that...
Yeah. I think that's until you're older. I think a lot of the celebrities are still like that now, especially like you get your Love Island, and they're all fighting for the same jobs. But when you get older, and I've moved out of that, and I took a step back, and I can actually realise, like, I've got my life where I am, and if I want to step back into it and come down to London and do a bit of work now and again, I can, and then go back to my normal life, and that's what I love.
Because a lot of people who've been through these, reality programmes and celeb TVs and whatever, they've kind of said that the programmes have used them and then dumped them.
Yeah, I do get that, because it's that sort of like on to the next. But obviously for someone like myself, I've been fortunate enough to have such a long career, and I'm thankful that I'm still around.
You've had a good run.
Yeah, 20 years later. But a lot of the TV shows now are sort of, the yearly shows, and they haven't got the sort of magazines anymore and things like that. It's all online, and it's hard. It's a hard industry to be in.
Now, you're a bit of a campaigner. You talked earlier about domestic violence.
Yeah.
But also plastic surgery, you know, having lips done and boobs done and whatever else. And hey, it's not just women, men do a lot of this now, Botox, you name it. You know, we get it from America, but it's becoming ever more part, you know, of millions of people's lives. They've got to get this operation, that operation. But you're kind of, you know, flying a flag here and same as a warning here, aren't you?
Yeah, I've had a lot of problems with surgery in the past, especially with my boobs. I nearly died, and it was just horrendous. And obviously, anyone that is wanting to have surgery, I'd tell them to just consider it really carefully, because there are so many risks. And now being a mum of 5, like, I definitely wouldn't put myself through that. Like, I just wouldn't take the risk of not being there for my kids.
No, well, you really think it's that serious, the potential risk of doing these operations?
Yeah, I mean, obviously some surgeries are more risks than others, but you've just got to consider it. So, like, I had a blood clot after the surgery that I had, and I literally lost like half. I think it was 6 pints of blood I lost on the table, and luckily they were like able to save me. But
there's a lesson here.
Yeah.
Grow old gracefully, folks. That's the lesson I think that Danielle's giving us.
And now, like, I look at my kids and I think, like, you know, luckily I am here for them, and like, now I've got to look after myself. So now I'm in the gym every day looking after my body rather than...
Now, I'm going to say, we're going to finish with that, because I think the most important part of your, far more important than anything else you've done, is that you've got 4 boys and you've got a daughter.
I know.
As well.
I know.
So you're a pretty busy mum.
I am, non-stop. Literally, it's crazy, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I literally eat, sleep and breathe for my kids now. Like,
how's it for one daughter with 4 brothers?
She's more hard work than the boys.
Oh, no.
She is. I've wished and wished and wished for her, and she's like a little diva, but the boys dote on her, so, yeah.
And what's the age range?
The oldest is nearly 13 and the youngest is 1.
Oh, your problem. Let me tell you something. Your problems haven't even begun. It gets a lot more difficult.
Thank you. The oldest one's getting a bit grumpy and a bit like just wanting to stay in his bedroom, and the clothes get through on the floor, and
a bit like Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin and Perry, that's what I call them.
Well, Danielle, I have to say, you've lived quite a long life in the public spotlight.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about 20 years or so that you've been doing all of this, and you seem, despite a few problems along the way, to be pretty happy with life.
Yeah, I am. I am really, really happy. I'm in a really good place. And everything that I've been through in the past has got me where I am today, and it's been one big lesson.
And for young girls, wanting to be models, still a good career?
Yeah, why not? Like, if that's what they want to do. But with the same with my children, I'll always tell them to go to school and get your education, because that's the most important thing.
Excellent. Thank you for joining me on Talking Pints.
Thank you.
Thank you. OK, we've got a couple of minutes left for Barrage the Farage. You send in your questions. I've no idea what they are going to be. Ryan says, what are your predictions for CPAC? What do you think why has DeSantis chosen not to appear? Ryan, this is a very sore subject. I am seriously hacked off. I was flying on a 7:30 flight tomorrow morning from Heathrow to Washington, D.C. to be at CPAC. They've cancelled the flight. I'm not a happy bunny. I'm going to have to go in through New York tomorrow. So I will be on your screens from New York City tomorrow evening, your time. DeSantis is not there. My guess is he doesn't want to go head-to-head against Trump at this stage. He will know that is a big Trump-supporting audience. The Donald will be there on Saturday. I'll be there too. I'll give you a full report when I'm back with you, back from the States on Monday. Yvonne says, when are the human rights going to cover the British people who pay taxes, etc.? We are being violated daily. You know, Yvonne, this is one of the... There are 2 things, I think, that I get a lot from people in every day with emails, meeting people in the street, pubs, wherever. And there's a sort of, the politicians are detached from us. No one's ever held to account for getting things wrong. And somehow it's as if We care more about people that come from all around the rest of the world, even if they haven't got a very good cause, than we do about our own people. And it makes a lot of people out there really pretty blimmin' angry. I'm done for tonight. I will join you live, 7 o'clock UK time from New York City tomorrow. But before that, let's get the all-important weather.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. A few showers around this evening, but they'll fade.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Good evening, I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. The State of the Nation tonight. Freed from the tight muzzle of collective responsibility, you will hear my honest and frank stance on the pandemic as the lockdown files are dropped. And 130,000 plus civil servants will be striking on no other than Budget Day.